Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast. We are in season 3 of the podcast, and it is my pleasure to have with me today Dr. Helen Wright. And Dr. Helen Wright is a coach, but before she took on the coaching mantle, so to speak, she was also a school leader. And we're going to be talking about why every school leader should consider having a coach. When do you need one? Why do you need one? Why is it important that you get someone else to listen to what's going on that's got no attachment to your school or even to you as a person, family member, etc.? What place do coaches hold? So we're going to dive into that today. And I am excited to have her. I've been aiming at her for a long time and I didn't get her. And I don't give up. People know that. I will carry on until I do. And so it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Helen, to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such a lovely introduction. Thank you. And it's my real pleasure to be here. And you know, I love talking about coaching. I love talking about education, about how we develop people, etc. But I'm really looking forward to making sure the message is really clear that every school leader deserves a coach.
Brilliant. So before we actually go into the questions and the answers and the conversations, please give us a brief intro. Who is Dr. Helen Wright?
Oh, that's such a difficult question, isn't it? I mean, who is anybody? I can give you a few highlights of that in the sense that I led schools for 13 years. For the past 8 years, I've now over 8 years actually, I've developed a portfolio of activities. So non-executive board work, largely in education and supporting schools, recruitment, because I work with LSC Education on recruitment of international school leaders, and coaching, which is a really significant part of what I do, executive coaching of leaders. Largely, not exclusively school leaders, but most of them are school leaders because I just think it's so important. Plus, of course, I'm bringing experience to understand and have a big empathy and sympathy for people. I have 3 children of my own, aged 19, 15 and 12. I travel a lot, well, used to travel a lot before the pandemic, do a lot of work in the Middle East with leaders and schools. And I suppose every day I just try to make the world a better place. That's what I try to do.
I like that. Every day I try to make the world a better place. Can I steal that? I like that.
Yes, yeah. And it requires discipline, that as well. Sometimes you've really got to work at it because it's hard, but it's really important. Do you know what? I think that's what people in education do. I think they almost take it for granted that it's just a part of their psyche, that they're trying to make a difference, trying to do something that's really meaningful. And I think that that's a very powerful engine in the world.
It is. It certainly is. That's why it's very stealable as a quote. I'm going to hop onto Twitter and I'm trying to make the world a better place, one
Excellent.
person at a time. I love it.
Yeah.
So coaching and school leadership they're really buzzy right now. I remember a post recently, I think before we went off on the summer break, Mark Lepard from the British School Akhbara, who I keep referencing in this podcast for some reason. Hello, Mark. He talked about why, asking a question, do you have a coach? Why is a coach needed? Should school leaders have coaches, etc.? And it got a lot of traction, got a lot of responses. I have to admit, I was one of the people he tagged and I was like, well, I'm no longer a school leader. I left in 2018. However, I still think it's such a relevant topic. And I wanted to talk to you about it because you understand both sides of the coin. So,
Yes.
Dr. Helen, my first question is, what are some of the things that school leaders go through that when they do, really it is necessary for them to think about coaching, or should they be thinking about it before they go through anything?
I think people need, and school leaders need a coach throughout. And it's almost when you don't know that you need something, that you need it. And so if I think about my own experience of being coached, I was a school leader relatively young. Well, I was young. My first headship was when I was 30. And when I was in my second headship, about halfway through the second headship, somebody said to me, I would like to coach you, Helen. And at the point I thought, well, can't invest in me, you know. I mean, that's typical. That's absolutely typical that school leaders go, oh no, there's other, you need to spend money on other things first, because we're reluctant to step up and say, do you know what? If the school doesn't invest in us as leaders, then it's not going to be investing in the school, full stop. And that process, because I agreed to it, I said, well, okay, then it completely opened my eyes to the power of coaching. Absolutely open, because I was delving into who I was in ways that I hadn't seen before, because we've all got blind spots, our Johari windows, you know, the unknown unknowns. Of course, we're not going to know ourselves. And you do get a little bit surrounded as a school leader by people who will tend to do what you say they will do and they should do. Or people will challenge you, but actually there's still that power dynamic, and it's quite difficult for you to have honest discussions. Also, there's a lot of operational stuff going on, and even the strategic stuff is, in a sense, it has to be operationalized. So when I had this coach and taking that time out, and she really challenged me, and goodness me, not only did I develop, but the school went to the next level. I mean, absolutely did. We were more ambitious about things. It opened up whole other areas, nationally, internationally, for the school. It made a phenomenal difference. And I hadn't realized that could happen because I hadn't thought about having a coach. So that was my first real experience. Then, of course, you do a lot of coaching yourself anyway, so informal coaching. Then I began to think about this a lot more and thinking, you know, if I didn't know that, and it required somebody to come along and say, you should be coached, what might have happened if I hadn't had that opportunity? Because I wouldn't necessarily have sought it out. I wouldn't necessarily know, because you don't know what you don't know. And I do think when I step back, I think that leaders need coaching into a role. So there's that sense of, you know, what role are you going to do? Where are you headed now? And then also that mixing, that connecting with the environment you're in, somebody to ask you those questions, because that's what coaching is all about. It's about asking challenging questions and helping you come up with action plans around that. So ask the question, you know, who are the people? What are the needs? You know, all of those things that may seem obvious and aren't, because they're all about human beings. So people need coaching into a role, and then coaching through the role, because goodness me, there's such a lot that happens in a school leader's life. And it's people relationships, external events, family issues, themselves personal issues. You know, there are all sorts of things where you cannot really talk to anybody in school as openly as you can talk to an external confidential source. You just can't do it. It just, there are too many areas. People say it often as from a governor's perspective, and I chair the board of an international school, and I know that I want to be able to coach and help the principal, but in actual fact, I know there are things the principal's not going to tell me, because even if I say I've got my coaching hat on and there's confidentiality around that, they're not going to, because there's an element of, well, you know, I'm part of the group who pay their salaries. So you know that's why people need external sources of or external focuses for people to be able to talk to them. So there's that whole coaching through the role, and then there's the coaching out of the role, as a coaching to the next step. You know, where is it you want to go? Or when is the time to start moving on? Because you're not going to be in that role forever. You're not going to be in the same part of the world forever, or have the same family circumstances every year. That's not going to be the same. So what does that look like? What do you need to keep checking in on? What do you need to see? Where can you see the signs? And also, let's not just get to the point where you fall off a cliff and then have to do something. What can you plan for? You can't plan everything, but you can if you have a good coach, then you've got somebody who's helping you look ahead to the future. So I think you ask the question of what is it that people really need a coach for? My answer to that is everything. Everything.
Yeah.
You don't know what you need a coach for until you have a coach. And that rigor being there. It's funny. I mean, one of my coachees once said to me, because usually, you have coaching with Dr. Helen, there is usually some homework to be done, something. And it's the power of the coaching is in the bit between sessions. And he said to me, when I knew we were meeting today, I did all of these things. I made sure I know that. I said, I did all of this stuff that needed to be done. It was just like the thought of it being in the diary. You always just need to schedule it. And then it's okay, but actually, obviously you do need to spend time in the coaching session. But I thought that was important too. That sense of a guide, somebody working alongside you, supporting you, being there for you as a school leader, utterly focused on you, and that is where the power of coaching comes in.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I want to take you back to your own coaching. And I want to drill down a little bit. Can you think of a specific thing or a specific scenario where the coaching helped you explicitly to unravel what was happening there?
Yes, yeah. So I said that the school moved to new heights because of that. So one of the things that I covered in the coaching was that I was at that point, the school was running really well. It had gone through a lot of transformation. We had to change a lot of things. You usually do when you go into school some way or another. But it uncovered that through the coaching that I felt the need to be doing all things for all people within the school, to the extent that, I'll give you one specific example, I was making sure I was still proofreading everything that was going out to the school. And because just because I want to get the answer right now, I'm a very good proofreader. I think I was probably the best proofreader in the school in many ways, but I was a very expensive proofreader. And the coaching helped me appreciate that and understand that. And that unlocked something for me because it meant I had to release that to other people, to trust other people. And people knew by then what it was that needed these high standards I had. And that released time, focus, and effort to be able to go, right, okay, world, how do we make sure that the profile of this school is absolutely up there and out there, and people can see the amazing stuff that's going on in the school, because that was important within the context of that school. So that it was that uncovering and unlocking of that element, and then the shift that had to be made about not proofreading. Sounds like a tiny thing, but it was a big shift, and that really unlocked. Now, you don't know what it is that, when I'm coaching, I don't know what it is that will need unlocking. You don't know. You will find it, though. You find it through the coaching. You find it through the building of the relationship, through asking the questions. And that's what my coach did for me, helped me in that. And we all benefited.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I wanna go to what probably is a sticking point for a lot of school leaders, is that they have to, especially in this part of the world, they have to convince the owners or the board that this is important and that is something that they need to come out of pocket for, to get a coach for maybe the senior leadership team, or even extend it further to the middle leadership team. Because you say you have to be coached into a role, you have to
Yes.
be coached while you're in the role, and you also have to be coached when you're exiting that role. How do they convince their boards or their owners that this is something that is necessary? Do you have any tips or strategies? Because it's going to take convincing to get people, especially in this time, to let go of money for coaching.
Well, by the time we've finished this podcast, what I would suggest to them is just listen to this podcast and get. I think that's the plan, because the more that people say it, the more people go, yeah, sure. I mean, can you think of any leader in a FTSE 100 company or a top company anywhere who doesn't have a coach? I mean, I just, everyone I've come across that level and working beyond education, they have a coach. Of course, they have a coach. It's just an obvious thing. You could give any sports person who doesn't have a coach. Yeah, that's type of coach. Of course, we have several coaches, different aspects. People have coaches, leaders have coaches. And I think what we've got to do is get to the point of just saying, well, this is so obvious and clear that's what's needed. So that's why it's really important that schools lead by example. And I think there's maybe 10 years ago, people saw coaching as something, well, you coach if there's a problem, and you coach as in a remedial way. And I think, I mean, I've certainly seen a tipping point where people aren't saying that. They say, I want to coach because I want to grow. I want to coach because I want to develop. Now, the more that there's schools say that and do that, I think the better. Now, you referred to what Mark Leppard said in his recent the trail and LinkedIn, and that's a really interesting trail to look at, because the number of people who are coming forward saying, yeah, but of course I've had a coach, I have a coach, I work, my school provides me as a coach, and so in order to persuade people, boards who maybe haven't thought of this, I think that's a very good starting point. But you know what? I think there's something deeper than that as well. I think it's the fact that people need, and school leaders need to say, first of all, I deserve a coach. And so often, what holds school leaders back from even taking that to the board or to the director of education is that there's a bit of them that thinks they don't deserve it. Might be a bit that thinks they don't need it, but then people need to overcome that, because we all need help from other places in lots of ways. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it's that sense of, do I deserve a coach? Couldn't I spend my money, or the school's money, on other things that would be more effective? Well, no. It's that question about, you know, when you're in an aircraft and they go through the bit at the beginning when they tell you what to
Safety
do, there's the
procedures.
emergency. Yes, that's right. And that bit is very about the mask is really, really important. They say it each time because it's not quite intuitive. They say, put the mask on yourself first before you help others. And they say it because it's not absolutely intuitive. We often want to help others. And I would say that female leaders, in my experience, are much more likely to want to help others before themselves, much less likely to want and demand a coach. But that's a gender issue which we've still got to work with. But I think I can see it across the board, though. So you have to invest in yourself as a leader. The school, the board needs to invest in you as a leader if you are going to be able to take the school to the next level, and actually and make it the best school it can be, or set of schools it can be. So I think it starts with the individual, but equally people need to look out and point out at all the great examples that are going on of coaching, and seeing how effective and impactful it is. And of course, it's not something that it's not actually as expensive as people might imagine. It's not, because usually you might typically have, say, 10 coaching sessions over the year, maybe sort of once a month. Probably it's not, you're not looking for somebody to come and live in your house. You know, it's not that expensive when you really drill down into it, and what it's something that you can move on from. So it is right that people might have different coaches as well. They'll seek a coach that's right for them at that particular time. And I will always say to people, you know, I'm very happy, we'll contract for a period of time. So say those 10 sessions, is it the year, and then say, right, okay, do you want to continue? And I'm fine if people don't want to, but I would always recommend they find another coach. But usually I find people do want to continue, but it's not something that's an absolute fix. You're not signing away your life in blood, you know, basically. When you think about it, the cost of it is minimal compared to the impact that it has. And recruiting a school leader is really expensive for schools. Of course, they should be investing in them. And I think this comes back to this investing in people and school leaders as they come into roles. From the minute, I see a lot of recruitment, obviously, and from the minute that somebody is appointed, then I think they should have a coach at that point. The school should make sure that they have a coach at that point. Because if when you think about it, the minute the person's appointed, the dynamics have already started to shift, but they definitely shift. They shift in their existing school, they shift in the school that they're going to. And particularly in education with the long run-in times they have before leaders take up their roles, during that period of time, the school itself can be moving in one direction. The leader might be moving in a different direction if they're not being encouraged to keep in touch, keep asking themselves, keep working on their own selves as well, keep working on themselves, recognizing, delving down a bit deeper through psychometrics into, where are the areas which I can develop in? What is it that I might need to work on? What would be a good strategy for my first 90 days? And if you can start doing that, the chances of that being successful, that relationship, are much, much higher. It makes sense, doesn't it? So why not invest in it?
Yeah.
Much cheaper in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to play advocate for a little bit,
Yes.
because recently I do notice a real massive increase in the number of coaches that are coming out, saying, I'm a coach, hire me, I'm this or that, I'm a leadership coach, I'm a mindset coach, I'm a this coach. Like there is a niche within a niche within a niche in coaching nowadays. Like there's a coach to help you choose your shoes, it seems. Um,
Oh, I'd like to find one of those.
no, I'm being facetious, but the truth is there is like a plethora. Have you been on LinkedIn? There's like a coach for a coach for a coach, right? What qualifications, what qualities, what should we be looking for when we're choosing our coaches?
Well, I do think that experience is one thing, training is another. So, and both of those are important. But I mean, fundamentally, it's going to come down to the relationship between the person and the coach, whether it works for them. So you'll see that the proof is in the pudding to a certain extent. But in terms of qualifications, then so I qualified. I have the ILM level 7 qualification in executive coaching and mentoring, which is kind of master's level in coaching, and that is significant. That's that work in the corporate world. That definitely is what people are looking for. So I think that's a good starting point. Different people do have different tracks that they've been down. It's not as obvious as if when somebody says, "Well, I've got an A level or I've got a BA." That it's not as obvious what that means. But to be frank, even talking about each of those, if we talk about the different university degrees that people do, that's not always clear what that's prepared people for either. So delving down a little bit into that's important. But that gives you an idea of the kind of standard. If you're working with leaders who are school leaders, principals, executive principals, members of the board, CEOs, COOs, CFOs, whoever, then I think that level of experience is important. Plus, I think the experience of the coach themselves is important. That's not necessary to, as a coach, to have experience in the sector where your coachee is. It's not absolutely necessary. I do think, though, that in education, if you're being coached by somebody who doesn't really understand how complex schools are and how complex educational organization hasn't lived it, I think that's harder. I mean, maybe you want a coach who's going to take your mind into other entrepreneurial areas outside school, and that's fine. That's okay. It depends on what you want as a coachee. But I think there's something, what I found very useful, having been a school leader and having now worked with school leaders for 8 years, I mean, hundreds, thousands probably, actually, think about that, add them all up, is that I know what questions to ask. And you can spot blind spots as well sometimes. So when people are saying, "Oh, no, everything's fine, it's all lovely, it's all great," and I'm going, "Really? Well, tell me about, how are your support staff then? How are they doing? How do you know? I don't know. How do you know?" Just to give an example of, where are the areas in school? And then you discover that people don't go into the staff room, for instance, and you think, well, actually, what would happen if you did? So those are just like little tiny examples certainly being very conscious and aware of the dynamics that there are between leaders and boards. That comes through having had experience in that. So you've got that sector experience, and I think the experience of being a coach as well. So because I'm a member of the Association of Coaching, and I log all my hours and so on. So I've got a few thousand hours coaching now. And with that, as a coach, I'm growing each time. I'm practicing, I'm developing, I'm thinking and feeding my own learning as a coach. So thinking about questions. And in fact, I'm just finishing at the moment my ILM level 7 in coach supervision, which, because I do supervise a number of coaches as well through LSE Education for a number of coaches, and in another voluntary organisation as well. And that has also honed my understanding of what supervision is, because good coaches will have supervisors themselves. You need to have somebody. You're not an island. You need to have somebody who you can talk to, who can challenge you as well. A coach without a coach, it may be fine for a time, but people need to keep growing and keep developing. So I think those are the kinds of questions you might want to ask people if you're thinking of getting a coach. You're right, to go back to your original question, that people use the term coach actually quite loosely now. And they say, well, we'll provide you some coaching. What does that mean? What does that mean, particularly at certain levels? What's people talk about performance coaching? What's performance coaching? What is that? Is that they're just going to tell you what to do? Is that training by another name? Or I think delving down into it, what I'm talking about, and where my zone particularly is that one-to-one executive coaching, absolutely focused on challenging the individual leader in front of me to think, to grow, to question, to see, all of those different things. So I really I know that I'm being successful when I will have it a couple of times, at least in a session, when the person sitting in front of me will stop and will go, that's a really good question. And then they will think, and they will see it from a different perspective. And that may lead them on then to doing something different. Now, there are all sorts of different models people can work within. Some people are really passionate about working in certain models. I'm much more a pragmatic coach. I'll take a number of different models. I'll use bits from transactional analysis, neuro-linguistic programming. I've used various different psychometrics, all sorts of things, because I'm really person-focused, really focused. And that comes back, I suppose, to my philosophical approach of belief in John Dewey, really. I mean, it all goes back to that, where you start with the individual, and what it is that has led me through education, the belief in the individual child, the individual person. So I suppose that if you've got an authentic coach, you will have different types of coaches, because people show their authenticity in different ways. And part of the chemistry session that you have together at the beginning, before any coaching should take place ever, you always must have a chemistry session. Part of that is exploring that. Recommendation is important as well in that, then, isn't it? Because if somebody said to you should speak to so-and-so, that they'd be a really good coach for you, that person is saying that they know you and they know that person. So that's making a connection there. So there are lots of different elements that make for a really good coach, and how you can see what a really good coach is. But does that give you an insight into some of those different facets?
I mean, it does. I still want to drill down a little bit. When you talked about a chemistry session, what
Yes.
happens in that session?
Right. Yeah. So that is, I will never take on anybody as a coachee, without having a chemistry session with them. And that means getting together with them. So online is fine. Understanding from them what they would like from their coaching. What is it that why are they interested in coaching? And then I will talk a little bit about me. I'll talk but I'm really interested in them, obviously, and encourage them to ask me questions. And we'll talk about some practicalities around the coaching as well, time, cost, those sorts of things. But it's really trying to get an understanding from my perspective, is getting an understanding, can I work with this person? Do I feel inspired? Do I feel as though there's a purpose there? And for them, it's important for them to think, can they work with me? Do they like me enough? Do they trust me? Because you have to trust a coach. You need that strong confidential space. You have to trust a coach. But if somebody was saying to me, well, I've been told I need coaching, not sure I really want to do it, then I'm not going to make them, because that'd be daft. So it's that period of time. It could be half an hour, might be longer, when you're just exploring a little bit and finding where you connect as well. Where do your values connect sufficiently to be able to think, yeah, there's a basis of a good relationship here.
Is there anything that would make someone uncoachable?
But possibly, probably, I'm not sure, because I think there's certainly, I could imagine there are people who might think, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to coach this person, in which case you'd say it. You'd say it up
Why?
front.
Why?
I mean,
What would be some of those
because,
reasons?
and I think that's a really difficult one, because I'm talking hypothetically here, because part of my philosophy and part of who I am, part of my values, I'm an absolute determined eternal optimist. Absolutely. You're relentlessly positive and optimistic, and it's that comes to that can do, let's do approach. That's part of my whole approach to it. But I was just smiling to myself, because if somebody just didn't want to be coached, they're not going to be coachable. So you can't make some. I'm not there to teach them. I'm not there to, and even teaching. I mean, well, I use that actually quite loosely in a way that I shouldn't use it, because teaching is actually about enabling people to learn. But I just think it'd be a waste of time and money, and it's just, no, that person might just need to work on something else. Now, the other thing, of course, that you do need to be aware of as a coach is where the boundaries are between coaching and, say, therapy. So coaching is not counselling. So if somebody presented and said, actually, I'm really struggling with, I don't know, maybe it was grief, or they might be struggling with other things, so coach might not be the right person, actually. And you would certainly signpost that person then towards counselling or towards other kinds of therapies and so on, because that's outside my remit. I know that there's a bit of a crossover in places, but they are separate. So that would be another example. It doesn't mean that person is uncoachable. It's just that they're not ready for coaching at that point. And you need to be, ethically aware of that. Coaches who are members of one of the coaching organizations will abide by the Global Code of Ethics. And that's certainly part of it.
You touched on something there where you said coaches aren't therapists. And so if someone needs a therapist, then really they need to be signposted to one. But when it comes to coaches, I'm always curious, do coaches give you the answers, or do they just sort of talk you through working it out for yourselves? Like, what are we getting when we sit in a session?
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, if we're in a session, you have the answers already within you. I believe in you as a person, as whoever is sitting in front of me, as a person, you have the answers. The human spirit is amazing. Human beings are phenomenal, and we have the answers within us, often really hidden. They're hidden somewhere, they're layered over by lots of says, well, I can't do that, or that wouldn't work, or all sorts of things there. But you have the answers inside you. So my job as a coach is to help you uncover that. So we would want to look at, I'd be interested in knowing, when you're coming for coaching, what it is that what's brought you to coaching? Those would be my questions. What has brought you to coaching? Let's explore that to begin with. So what is it? So what's that sense of something that you might want to work on, or something maybe maybe not, you might not be absolutely clear. But then let's explore a bit more. Let's explore where you are, what's going on, etc. All of those different things. And as you're doing that and you're articulating it, then you're already starting to uncover some of the answers to problems which maybe you, or issues that maybe you haven't fully realized before, because you are talking them through. And I'm in the meantime noticing things. I'm noticing your language. I'm noticing how you are. I'm noticing that little aside that you made just a few moments ago about something. I'm noticing all of that. And then I can reflect that back to you. Now we do want you to move on. This isn't just about sitting and wallowing in thoughts and feelings. So no, we've got to move on, but we don't. No, you won't know at the beginning necessarily where it is you're going to move on to. You won't know what the solution is. I'm absolutely not going to say, oh right, I see you've got a problem there. Let me tell you the solution. Here we are. So that's you have no ownership over that, and that's my opinion, not yours. It's a privilege to be a coach, to be listening, utterly focused on the person, hearing what they're saying, drawing out, pulling out those elements, and then going, well, okay, so now what are you going to do about this? And then there are lots of tools that you can use and so on to help people with that. But I get a great deal of satisfaction from that, because it's a privilege to be able to enable people to become the best of themselves. It's amazing. Why else are we in education? This is just a different aspect of this.
Yeah, no, it's really true. I could actually listen to you all day. You have a very nice way of delivering what you say that makes
Very
people just kind of just want to listen. Um, but I want to talk to you about scenarios in which leaders get to, when is it too late at any point for a leader to be coached? Is there a point where it's just too late?
So are you talking about, for example, a situation where a leader might have got into some kind of difficulty with their
Yes.
superiors or something? The answer is it's never ever too late, but
Hmm.
the outcome could be different depending at what point that the coaching was taking place. Yeah. So it's never too late to recover from something. It's never too late to decide to take a certain path, but your options might be more limited if you've let it get to a point where, say, there's been a breakdown in relationships with people. And which is another reason, of course, why coaching all the way through what you're doing, in your job is so important. So I sometimes things do go wrong in schools. They might, it might be because of the individual, it might be because of the relationship, it might be for all sorts of reasons. And at that point, I think the job of the coach is to work out with the leader what are the options, what's actually going on, what are you feeling, how are you managing where you are now, what is it that you can see as a way forward, and then let's think about how we help you get there. What is it you can do, and so on. So when you say, is it ever too late? Well, it might be too late to rescue that situation, but it's never too late to ensure that coachee, that leader, emerges the best of themselves, and that they're able to go on and do something. Because often if something hasn't quite gone right, there are reasons for that which can go quite deep, and it might never have been the right place, or it might have been an impossible situation to be in. So if that's the case, well, what can you gain from it? Amazing experience. Sometimes when things don't quite go right in organizations, then and people have to move on and take a slightly different path than one they thought. I mean, the number of times people turn around and say, well, that was amazing. I just needed that. I'm now in a place where I want to be, where I'm happy. I'm the round peg in the round hole now. And sometimes it takes that. It's just you'd rather it was more comfortable than it can be sometimes. I think that's where self-awareness comes in, working with people at coaches to help, all of that's part of that. Definitely.
Lovely. I just glanced at my watch. We've been chatting for like 45 minutes straight. It did
That's
not feel like that at all. I'm just sitting here just soaking it in. What does successful coaching results look like? So a leader having gone through coaching and come out the other end, what does that look like?
Well, remember that part of what I'm saying is that really there shouldn't ever be another end to come out of, that there's something that you keep working through.
Oh, so you'll
So it's a
never,
process.
right.
Well, because then you have self-coaching, you have that. I think you develop a coaching awareness. I think it ultimately it opens up. Coaching opens up you to become the best of yourself, to recognize who you are, to have the appropriate humility around that, the appropriate ambition around that, the be able to understand your values, find yourself um, working then towards being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, the right environment, all of that. And coaching helps you on that journey. It's not going to present it, stuff, bang, here it is on a piece of paper, look what you've got to do, just follow this. It's not that. It's a unique process for each individual. And as I say, you sometimes need different coaches at different times of your lives. And that's where the values of the coach and the experience of the coach and the areas in which the coach works, those are all important elements to consider when choosing a coach too. And you can try out a coach if you want. You can try that out, because if it helps take you that bit further forward in your life, then that's amazing. Remember, we only have one life and we want to make the very most of it. And I think we owe that to ourselves, but more importantly, we owe that to the world, and to our fellow human beings to make the most of what we do. So it's like, yeah, we can't do it alone. So let's find ways to help us. And school leaders are in a particularly important role, because they have responsibility for the lives of so many people, and can influence so many people. So let's really help them be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Wow. I'm not going to ask any more questions. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant place to end the pod. Thank you so much, Dr. Helen, for coming on the Teach Middle East podcast. I think if school leaders did not think they needed a coach, by now, if they've listened to this point in the podcast, they're convinced. I'm convinced. I'm no longer a school leader, and I am convinced I want to go back and get a coach and come back. I'm really grateful for your time and for being so generous with your expertise and talking to us. And how can people reach you if they want to talk to you or want to get to have an exploratory chemistry session with you?
Well, I'm not difficult to find, and LinkedIn's probably the best way. A lot of people have my own personal contacts, but LinkedIn is the message me, connect and message on LinkedIn, or connect through LSE Education. So I'm not difficult to find, and I'm out in the Middle East quite a bit anyway. But it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, and I've quite enjoyed answering the questions rather than just asking them today.
Oh, I'm sure there are loads more questions. I will link Dr. Helen's LinkedIn page in the show notes. And if you want to shoot her a question or two, I'm
Perfect.
sure she'll be, gracious enough to answer. I've got some questions of my own, obviously, in terms of coaching, but I'm sure that you would have gained something great from this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Teach Middle East podcast.